Well, thank you all. I am Michael Cardillo, and I do sound. That was my bio, right? We're good with that? You guys don't want to hear about me, do you? A little bit? All right. I live in Atlanta. I've been, you know what? I'll go all the way back. Let's tell the story of Michael. I'm a listener. It's what I do. It's what I've always been. It took me a long time to figure out exactly where I fit in that. My favorite childhood Christmas gifts were a cassette tape recorder and then an acoustic guitar and then an electric guitar. And when I got the electric guitar, I could play. I didn't play. I just played with the knobs and switches, and I knew there was something different in my brain. So I kind of thought I wanted to be a film composer, but I wasn't real prolific at writing music, which is kind of a prerequisite. So I'm like, okay, I like that concept, but that's really not my thing. And then I thought, well, maybe I want to be a music producer. So eventually, after high school and a stint in the Navy, when I was first introduced to the great city of San Diego, yay, and then a job and all of that stuff. And I learned a lot of electronics and a lot of other great things. I learned about television. I learned stuff. And then I decided to go to school to study the recording industry, and I learned to become an audio engineer. With the hopes that I would eventually be a record producer. But during that course, I was nearing 30, and I was recording people on the side and having fun with that. And then I just kind of, as I got to know more and more people in the music business, I decided that's really not where I want to be. They're getting, remember pagers? We all had them, right? Their pager would go off at 2 o'clock in the morning because somebody was inspired, and they had to get up and go to the studio and hit the red button. And I'm like, yeah, maybe not, but what is this post-production thing that we talk about? And so I just I found a way to bring all of this sound that I was interested in and the movies, and of course, I'm not working for feature films, so I kind of found my niche. I've been in Atlanta working in post-production for about 20 years. Spent 8 of those years at Crawford, which people in Atlanta, as soon as you say Crawford, they're like, oh, yeah, I know Crawford. But big post-production company there, grew into something huge and then shrunk back down. They still have audio, but they're pretty small now. We can cut that, right? And then yes, we are editors. And I went out on my own, and I've been essentially freelance for about 12 years since then, maybe 13, maybe 14, maybe they overlap a little. I don't know. But I do sound for all kinds of different things. I do long form, short form, video game projects, all kinds of cool stuff. And I just love sound. Sound is my thing. Like even while I'm sitting here, I'm trying to reproduce this reverb in my head. Like how would I mix this scene? And why are these people so quiet? I would have made them louder. No, I'm just kidding. So that's me. And so what I want to talk about, this is something I've been kicking around for a while. It's influencing creative decisions with sound, because as a person who loves sound and works professionally with sound, I feel like I'm an advocate for sound, because everyone in this room I know edits sound. I get that. How many of you typically, more than 50%, send what you're working on to an audio person to finish the sound? How many of you do that? Once in a while. We've got a once in a while and a not anymore. Okay, well, that's legit. I mean, that's the way of the world, right? That's the way things work. So if I can help you think about sound differently or add any little thing to your sound repertoire, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to be platform agnostic here. The NLA wars do not enter into my world. We're not playing in Premiere or Final Cut or Avid, unless you consider the fact that Avid bought Digidesign 15 years ago, and I am in Pro Tools. But anyway, so influencing creative decisions with sound. We all know who George Lucas is, and he said sound is 50% of the movie-going experience. Well, if you talk about the emotional experience, I think sound is more than 50%, especially if you include music, which you need to include music in sound. Sound is definitely more than 50% of the emotional experience. And so the target audience who I have prepared this for, editors. How many editors do we have in the room? All right. Writers of any sort, script writers, anybody who edits documentaries is kind of a writer. You know what I mean? Like just writers, people who are creating the story. Directors, cinematographers. I actually, as I was preparing this talk, I started to I've always made connections between color and sound, because a colorist is mixing light the way that we mix sound mixing, but of course we're editing sound also, and we're adding sound, and we're creating sound, so we're sort of the compositor, animator, shooter, we're the equivalent of all of that, essentially. And so we're covering it all. Oh, I did leave this slide in. I meant to take this slide out, but it's funny. I think we've all heard that, right? Oh, picture without sound. Yeah, I'll read it because I know it's hard to read. Sound without picture is called radio. Picture without sound is surveillance. So what makes a good edit, or what makes a good cut, as Walter Murch said? Everybody knows Walter Murch, but how many people have read In the Blink of an Eye? Half is good. I'll take that. The rest of you should go buy it. Amazon's got it for like, $6. I don't know. But in there, the rule of 6. This is really, really cool stuff. So Walter, and I'm going to skim over this really fast, but Walter Murch likes to talk about how in film school they would teach you that if a person opens a door and starts to walk, you'd have them walk halfway across, and then you would cut to the other angle where they finish walking across the room and they sit down at their desk or whatever. And that is continuity in a three-dimensional space of action, and that was the most important thing that he learned in film school. And he gives it on his rule of 6 most important things that make a good cut. He puts it way down here at the bottom and gives it a 4% weighting. So there's definitely some stuff above that. And it's a little tongue-in-cheek, these numbers, but I'll come back to that just a little bit. But just skimming through it real fast. Emotion, he's just saying be true to the emotion of the move, of the moment. It advances the story, so the cut needs to advance the story. That's kind of important. It needs to be rhythmically interesting. It needs to feel right. Eye trace is important. You guys know this stuff, right? I can just skim on. I used to cover all of this for audio people, but you guys know this. We're coming back to this, trust me. Robert Bresson, who knows who Robert Bresson is? He was a French minimalist filmmaker. He died in the 80s actually, but he's got some really cool quotes. I felt this one was pretty inspirational for you guys. Make visible what without you might perhaps never have been seen. That just makes you feel good to do what you do, right? But the quote I want to talk about is, one cannot be at the same time all eye and all ear. And he goes on, when a sound can replace an image, cut the image or neutralize it, the ear goes more towards the within, the eye towards the outer. That's kind of cool. So he's saying sound can be more personal, more emotional, where image tends to be more matter of fact. Image has more data. I mean, you guys know about data rates when we used to make DVDs and even streaming and everything. You need, for picture, 10 times, well, you guys are probably at 20 times sometimes, but no more than 10. About 10 times the data for picture than you do for sound, and it's true for what's going into your brain. You're getting a lot more data through your eyes than you are through your ears, but your ears are hitting more emotional things. And you're getting a lot of data. It's certainly more than 10% through the ears. I'm not a brain scientist, so I don't know. But what you hear is instrumental to telling the story that your eyes are picking up. You have to use both together, but when a sound can replace an image, go with it. So I'm saying using sound as a storytelling tool can increase emotional impact. And don't worry, the whole thing's not slides. This is, 10, 15 minutes. I just feel like I need to do slides because I've never done it before. And beyond the emotional impact, we're going to create rhythm, which is huge. So we look at that and we say story, emotion, rhythm. Add those up in Walter Murch's rule of 6, you're at 84% just with those three. So you could literally cut to black, have good sound, and you're at 84% of a good cut. So the idea here is sacrifice from your way up. You never give up emotion before story, or story before rhythm, or rhythm before eye trace. That's kind of the concept there. And that, when you're thinking about that cut, it's not just the visual, of course, the sound plays into that. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm being an advocate. So we can skip this slide because I'm just tooting the horn of how important sound is, but you guys all get that. I just want to kind of, we know about emotion, story, rhythm. Focus we're going to touch on a little bit later, and continuity of space. That's huge. I mean, you can shoot something, you can do anything you want with your camera angles, you can break your plane of whatever, and as long as I put a nice big ambience in there and I put that sound where it belongs, the viewer is grounded, and that's very important. So I want to talk about sound as energy. This may be everything else that I've said. You guys are probably all very comfortable with that. You haven't really learned anything. And you think about light as energy. I mean, when you're about ready to go point a camera at something, you think about light, energy quite a bit, from both the technical and the creative aspects. If it's a dark room, like I wanted to turn off these lights, but we're pointing a camera at me, that's kind of not going to work out, right? Would you put a blonde in a white shirt in front of a white building at noon? You might, but that's a creative decision. You're not going to do that from a technical standpoint by any stretch. So light energy is something that you guys probably think about a lot, especially if you're pointing the camera, but even if you're just the editor and somebody else was pointing the camera, you're thinking about that. But let's talk about sound as energy. So I think about sound as energy because I'm a mixer. It's what I do. I mix sound. And I've got this theory that I just love. It's called the mashed potato theory of mixing. And where that comes from, and I could do a whole talk on the mashed potato theory of mixing, but we're going to gloss over that just a little bit. What it is when you go to the cafeteria and you get your Salisbury steak or whatever you're getting with mashed potatoes, whatever you get with mashed potatoes, and then you get gravy, right? Well, you got this big mound of mashed potatoes. They don't just dump the gravy on top. They take that ladle and they stick it down. This might be a Southern thing. I don't know. Does this apply here? It applies. It's universal? Okay. Mashed potatoes translate across? Okay.
No, if you said grits, that wouldn't apply.
No grits. Well, because then we'd talk about butter or sugar or whatever people put on grits. I don't know. I'm not really from the South. I've just been there a long time. So they take that ladle and they shove it down into the mashed potatoes and they drop off your gravy, and there's room for the gravy, and that's kind of the idea. So we want the gravy in this case, like if you're doing a corporate video that's voiceover music, right? Well, the gravy's the voice, the mashed potatoes are the music. The mashed potatoes are a little bigger, but the gravy's what you really want. All right, so you got to make room for the gravy in the mashed potatoes. That's kind of the idea. And we talk about that, I mean, of course, overall level and loudness, like you need the overall level of your voice to be loud enough that you can hear it over the music, right? But then we also talk about the frequency spectrum. You might do some EQ, you might scoop out a little bit of your upper mids in the music, maybe even put a bump in the same spot on your voice, make room for that. So we're talking about overall energy for a basic balanced mix, energy across the frequency spectrum. We're also talking about image and panning. So your music hopefully is nice wide stereo. You don't have horns or piano or guitar right in the center because that's where your voice is going to be. So image, energy across the sound field, and then energy over time. If your music is very dynamic and you've got big music, small music, big music, small music, hopefully you've cut it in such a way that when there's small music, you're talking. Or maybe the music was scored that way, which is even better. So as we think about sound as energy, potatoes and gravy is just kind of two things, and there's an auditory hierarchy there where the gravy is, of course, the number one thing, and the potatoes are the number two thing. I like to go maybe three things, maybe more, but oh man, my brain just went blank. Who said, all right, we're going to just cut this part. I'm not going to go into that. You can hear, I said, I'm going to take full credit.
We won't know the difference.
Well, I didn't put that quote in my notes, see? The notes are important. You can consciously listen to between 2 and 3 sound sources at a time. That doesn't mean 2.5, that means between 2 and 3. So if you're hitting 3, don't stay there very long, you know? So if you've got music, sound effects, and voice, they're going to kind of come in and out. When there is voice, it's number 1. You're conscious of that. If there's something important below that, whether it's a certain sound effect, then it's number 2. If there's not a certain sound effect, then music is number 2 and the sound effect will be number 3. That's kind of typically how that's going to play out. And we'll see some of that later in one of the examples that I'm going to show. So it's just an auditory hierarchy. So I want you to always think about the auditory hierarchy as you move through this, and how can I use sound energy and the tools that control sound energy to influence that auditory hierarchy at any given moment. So first we're going to talk about sound across the frequency spectrum. And I like to give, so I just cut it up. I love, if I was giving a talk to just audio nerds, I'd probably cut the spectrum up into octaves. So octave is a musical term, but basically every time you double the frequency, you're into another octave. So if we start at 30 and we say, okay, 30 to 60 is an octave, well then 60 to 120 is an octave, 120 to 240 is an octave. You can kind of pick your numbers anywhere you want, but an octave is every time it doubles. You get a lot of octaves. But I cut it up here to just have low. Low gives you impact. If you're doing a high energy trailer, for example, or anything with music that has some energy, there's going to be some low. That's going to be impact. It can also be closeness. If it's low and slow and personal, you get a little closeness here, but you get more personal in the low mids. That's where there's a little more emotion. The fundamental frequency of our voice is there, and I'll show that a little bit later. Upper mids is the data. That's where the bulk of the audio data is. That's your message, that's your story. If this was our movie right now, we're kind of all right here. You know, the upper mids are the clarity of what I'm saying. The low mids are just the fundamental frequency of what I'm saying, and that's about it. And then the high is the detail that gives it certain quality. You know, it just sounds better. And then the very high is even more detail for those of us who can hear it. Some of us can't. But, and it's also like psychoacoustics, you know, as my sound bounces off the walls, all of this stuff is hitting your ear, thousands and thousands of little sound waves for every sound that I make. And your brain's putting all that together. And so when we're recreating a situation in a movie or a video of some sort, we like to include that stuff because it's kind of important. So I'm going to show a couple of tools during this presentation, and the one on the left is kind of squeezed back. It's just part of Insight 2 from Isotope, and it's a big meter. You know, we used to have all these big analog scopes for video and stuff. I mean, who's looked at a vector scope in the last 10 years, 15? I mean, I guess you still have them if you do that stuff. I don't even know. They were in the machine room back in the day. I never looked at that stuff. But we have meters. We got all kinds of meters. And one of them is called Insight 2, and it has a lot of different meters, and I'm going to show you guys that. And then this is just an EQ plugin. This is Neutron. It might be Neutron 3 from Isotope, but it's basically just showing you the frequencies go from low to high in this type of plugin and low to high on that type of plugin. And so these are my bands that we were talking about. That's low, and then low mids, and then upper mids, and then highs, and then the very highs. And even, you know, when you finish your product and you stick it on the web and it's compressed, you're not going to have these very highs anyway. They're going to go away. That's just a fact. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is equal loudness contour, the Fletcher-Munson curves. You know, it's something that audio engineers learn about because what it tells you is how we hear. Remember in the 70s, your stereo used to have a loudness button, and if you pushed it, it would give you more bass and more treble. And everybody just pushed it and left it there all the time. But the purpose of the loudness button was when you're listening at low level, it would give you more bass and more treble, because what this is saying is that this is the SPL, the sound pressure level in the room that needs to reach you for you to perceive a consistent loudness. So for me to perceive this loudness right here, it doesn't take a lot of energy up in these upper mids where the data is, the clarity, where I can understand speech. The human ear was designed to understand human speech, primarily. But then you can see, as things get louder, the energy kind of levels off a little bit. And that's important to know. It's especially important for sound people, but if you're not sending your stuff to sound people, that's a good thing to know. I got that one from Wikipedia, but I'll show my references at the end. So I'm going to take this time to move to a sample of cool stuff. You guys saw me playing the Hunger Games clip earlier. Who's seen this in the last 10 years, or I don't even know how old this movie is? The Hunger Games. I just watched it a couple months ago with my son. I'm kind of introducing, now that he's a teenager, I'm introducing him to movies that, you know, I think are cool. And I watched The Matrix with him, and we were done, and he's like, yeah, it was all right. And I'm like, what do you mean it was all right? It was revolutionary. And he's like, well, and then he starts talking to me about plot, and he's like, so what's the plot? They're in the Matrix. They're trying to find out if Neo is the one. Morpheus gets kidnapped, and they rescue him. I'm like, well, don't talk about the plot. I was like, it's sci-fi. There are themes there, and did you see how it was cool with the camera and the thing and he's lost on that. He's like, no, because everybody does it. It's done in commercials now. But anyway, we watched The Hunger Games, and he thought it was okay. And I'm like, oh, whatever. He's tough.
Wow, he'd be a reviewer.
I know. But he liked all the Marvel movies. The bar is pretty high. Okay. So, hey, I got notes for this, I think. So we're going to talk about sound energy. I just want to play this clip. For this one clip, let's dim the lights, and then we'll bring them back up.
From District 12. District 12, you know her as the girl on fire. Well, we know her as the lovely Katniss Everdeen.
What?
I think someone's a little nervous. I said that was quite an entrance that you made at the Tributes Parade the other day. Do you want to tell us about?
Well, I was just hoping that I wouldn't burn to death.
Love that. All right. I can never stop that where I want to. I want to stop it on what, because that makes my point. If you want to bring it back up, thanks. I love that clip. I was watching the movie with my son, and it came to that clip. And actually, everything leading up to that clip kind of did the same thing, where they played with sound energy to really, well, why don't somebody here, this is, by the way, stop me anytime, questions, comments, conversation, because honestly, if nobody stops me, this is going to be 30 minutes. We're all going to go grab a beer and go home.
All right.
Yay. So somebody tell me what they noticed about sound energy specific in the back.
I was gonna say, in the middle of this scene, it sounded like the engineer kind of changed the ambience of the tone, and added more reverb to it for effect.
Yes, more reverb, definitely.
Repeat what he said so it's on his camera.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay, so he said that he played with the tone, which is absolutely true, and added reverb. Well, both of those are very true. Basically, it's kind of like the audio version of a soft focus. It's almost like the cameraman just went full blur on that. But they didn't do it visually, they did it with audio. Yes?
Yeah, it's kind of like with the EQ, you know, you start with like really reverby, heavy on voice, and then as you went down, you kind of just started taking all the highs out.
Yes.
And you basically just have the low ends of the EQ up, and everything else is just muffled out.
And we're going to watch exactly how accurate what you just said is. I'm going to play the same thing. And what I want to show here is that this is a spectrogram. It goes from low frequency to high frequency here. This is basically 20 hertz to 20K. And then this is over time. And then the energy will be reflected in color. I don't actually look at it this way when I use this. But when I was preparing for the talk, it was the easiest to really see the definition of what it is that we're showing. I look at it as a waterfall where it's 3D and I can see the physical, so it's got a height parameter for energy, but in this case it's color for energy, so the colors will change. And then this over here is our sound field, and I don't actually view this one this exact way either. I don't ever really look at it hardly. But it's great for this demonstration because what we're going to see is they really wanted us in her head. And they used sound to do that. And so when she's walking onto that stage and the crowd is off to her left, of course we're not going to mix the whole movie solid left. So there's still a good bit of center content, but you'll see there's a lot more left than there is right to give us her perspective. And then when it gets all the way to the point where he's setting that microphone down on the floor and our frequency is all the way down to almost nothing, and all you get is that little thump. She didn't hear what he said, so we didn't hear what he said. So let's do the lights one more time, and I'll play the same clip. This time I'll stop at what?
From District 12, District 12, you know her as the girl on fire. But we know her as the lovely Katniss Everdeen.
What?
I think someone's a little
And just for a
nervous.
quick comparison, leave me off for just a second. If I run over
said that
here
was quite an
and I
entrance
play
that you
some
made.
crowd after she's a little more comfortable, the energy is all the way up. Now, it's not all the way up because this came from YouTube, and I apologize for that. If this was the mix, you can bring them back up. Thanks, DJ. If this was the mix that came off the board, you know, of the person who mixed it, or even the down mix from that board, since of course we're listening in stereo, yeah, you'd be getting it all the way up, and you'd really see a drastic change in the upper, the super highs. Am I not blocking too much, or?
No, it's just easier to see here.
Awesome. All right, so I've got a 6-minute clip from this movie that goes over and over and over about using sound to put us in her head, and we hear what she hears, and of course they sneak in some little bits that are important for story. And I'll play just a little one right here. So leading up to that scene, before she goes on stage, she's kind of waiting in a line. And if you remember, the other tributes, they call them, the other contestants in the Hunger Games, are coming on. He's interviewing them one at a time. And so they're playing the music up, and we don't have to do the lights, really. We're good. Yeah. They're coming up, and the music is strong because it's an emotional scene. There's not a lot of information. She's just waiting. But as her mind wanders, we hear a little more or a little less of what's being said, and it happens over and over, but I'll just pick one.
I'm prepared. Dishes, I'm ready to go.
It's more about the sound than the visual anyway. It's okay. So you can't really make out what they're saying half the time.
Good. She can climb trees. You're pretty quick.
Are you a hunter? Gatherer?
And so you can climb trees, you're pretty quick. Are you a hunter or a gatherer? He's talking to the little girl, Rue, I think was her name. And those words were more clear because later in the story they become close. And the reason I didn't make a big deal about looking at this is because we've got music full and I don't have it split out. If I could take the music out and show you this, you would see all of that energy, but you can hear it. You can hear what's going on. It's all blurry. They're coming in and out of focus. It's basically the equivalent of, yeah, our camera guy is deciding, yes, I want to see it, no, I don't want to see it. But instead, we're doing it all with audio. And I think that's pretty powerful. So the limited bandwidth plus the reverb is kind of like a soft focus. That's exactly, you guys are awesome.
So it's an audio point of view.
Yes, absolutely. And this is an extreme audio point of view. Like, it was so extreme when she didn't hear it, even though the guy's right there on camera, 2 feet from her, we didn't hear it. I think that's awesome.
That audio effect was planned in the script before they shot or in post?
I think it was, and any of you who are cinematographers help me out with this, because the more I played this over and over, and I kept seeing the extreme close-ups, and I actually have that in my slide later when I'm recapping this, but I'll just talk about it now. When they go to that shot when he drops the microphone, it's right there, such an extreme close-up. You've got half of her face, literally a shoulder and a neck for him. We are like way in there. They must have had this all planned out, you know. And it's funny because I watched this clip over and over and I'm like, there's one wide shot in the whole clip. And I'm like, why is that there? Oh, it was transitional. Like, I would love to sit in a circle and analyze 6 minutes of this movie with all of you, honestly. That we could stop right now and do that and I would be blown away. But we're going to keep talking about sound. Anybody, who else? Like, yeah.
So you were mentioning the range that most of us can't hear. Do you feel that that's kind of like the secret sauce at times, especially for the bigger productions like this? Like it's going to sweeten it a little bit, even though we may not be able to hear it?
Oh, it's definitely going to sweeten it a little bit. But the thing is, when you're mixing something, you want to try to mix in such a way that everybody who hears it is going to get a representation of what you're mixing. So probably the least important frequencies are over 10K. But I do it. In fact, in the project that I'm going to pull up in here in a little bit, I'll show you where I'm adding 10K plus to something, and you'll hear the difference. Well, you might hear the difference. I don't know. I can't make any promises. But you know, the question of, did they plan this? Was this a director thing? Did they plan it before they shot it? That's when there's a conversation that I love to have with creatives, and it's about how to communicate with other creatives who don't do exactly what you do. And so I would be real curious about how the director went about that. Did he go to each of the specialties and say, hey, I really want to put the audience in her head, do your thing. I want her POV. And so then, well, we pushed in on the video and we did this with the audio and we did whatever we did with color and set dressing and costume, and like everybody was on the same page. Like, this is our goal for this scene. I'm going to not tell you how to shoot it. I'm not going to tell you how to record it. Or did they give them specifics and say, this is exactly how I want it? You know, I would love to know that. Yeah. You know what? There is one more that I do want to play that I think would be pretty awesome. It's at the end. And I didn't mark it. Oh, it's at the end of her conversation before. Oh, I should have marked it. I am so bad. It's right here. You know how I can tell? The cinematography.
Did she come and say goodbye? She did.
So he's talking about her sister. Everybody knows the story that she volunteered as tribute because her little sister was called up. It was her little sister's first year being eligible, She's like, you're not going to go, I'm going to go. And so the sound energy here, and we can just listen to it because it's not a mix thing. It's not like the mixer did this. This is what the actors did. And so that's why I'm saying the sound energy doesn't have to be how is it going to be mixed, how is it across the frequency spectrum, how does one thing influence another. It doesn't have to be any of that. It could be, I need you to be real soft here and I need you to be real personal. And then, so this whole conversation from 37 to, for almost a minute, he's talking about her sister and how did she feel and what did you say?
I'd win for her.
She said, I would try to win for her.
What she did. And try you.
Ladies and gentlemen from District 12, Katniss Everdeen.
And so we have this contrast where for an entire minute we have gone down to just this really soft dialogue, and then we're back up to this guy being his character self that he is, and then full applause. And that applause is full spectrum applause too, because she's now comfortable. And I think that's powerful stuff. Even if nobody really thought of it as sound energy, that's what it is. So it's the acting, and of course the directing of the acting, that did all of that. I'm going to move away from Hunger Games unless you guys want to talk about it some more. I could hang out here all day. I loved this clip. When I saw this again with my son, I told you, I was like, wow. I didn't pick up on all of this stuff when I saw it originally. It just didn't dawn on me. I don't know why. But anyway, all right, we're going to move on. So I did this trailer. I did a game trailer for, there's a trailer editor named Derek Liu who lives in LA, and he does indie video game trailers, a lot of them. And he's really passionate about trailer editing. And he and I have kind of known each other for a little while through online and stuff. And we finally met earlier this year at GDC, Game Developers Conference. And we talked about audio, and he's like, well, I do my own audio. And I said, well, but then he was curious. He's like, so if I had you mix a trailer, what are we talking about? And I said, well, we kicked around some stuff, and he got a trailer that had some budget, and it also had some complexity. He had a jazz band, voiceover, and all the gameplay effects plus trailer effects. And he's like, I got a couple dollars. Let's see if Mike can mix this for me. And it worked out great. So I'm going to play, well, first I'm going to play the trailer just so that you guys can see it. And I'll do the lights because I didn't tell anybody it was coming. Is it this one?
Yeah,
No.
of course, yeah.
Ronnie O'Neal. He's been a thorn in my side. And now he says he wants to cut a deal. He doesn't know what's coming. But first, let's go back to the beginning. A week ago, I got into Chicago. As soon as I did, I started handing out my calling card. It wasn't long before I was building an empire and making contacts. I had a few ups and downs along the way. Eddie and Marie fell in love and ran off. And sure, Tammy's the best shot in town. If she doesn't show up drunk, that is. And Jack? No one would mess with Jack. Old Ronnie didn't take too well to my way of doing business. Now he thinks he's got me pegged. He ain't got nothing. What he doesn't know is I've been making deals all around town, and I got just enough cops to look the other way. Those who work with me are afraid of nothing. I almost feel bad for the guy. He's just a step on my way to the top. But if it wasn't me taking him down, it'd be somebody else. Think you got what it takes?
The Empire
Come and get it.
That was not me singing. And in fact, that guy, he actually held that note longer than that. When we cut this the first time, the client said, "Can you shorten that ending a little bit?" And we did. And actually, I did. And that's kind of a cool thing. I'm going to go ahead and screen share here for a minute. Mirror. What if I say mirror projector? What happens? That didn't work. It normally works. Mirror, no, I don't want that. Sorry guys. Technology. Let me just unplug that. And close. What do you have? Nothing. Pause. I lost everything. So, how about them Padres?
They lost today.
Oh, sorry. Had no idea. Hey, there we are. Okay. But now I lost my... Where's my edit screen? Well, that really didn't work. It is. It's behind this video. But I can't find the video. Make the video small. I don't know where it went. There anyway, there's my edit screen, and it's all messed up because I really didn't plan this part. But since you asked if I sang that, this was the original. Actually, this is my edited version. This was the original. And so this is where it ends now, and it actually was quite a bit longer. And it was incredible. This guy, here, I'll just solo it up. Whoops. Not doing it again. And they said, well, that's a little long. Well, if I didn't ask for the stems of the music, I would have had a tougher time. Well, impossible is what I thought. I gave the same presentation as sort of a practice yesterday in front of a bunch of audio students. And I sat there and said, well, if I did this in stereo, and I'm actually going to do it again because I was so amazed at what happened. I said, well, if I did this in stereo, how many of those things are up there? So basically, I want all of that to end up about here because this is what I did in the stems. So I'm just going to kind of do that. So if I just take a bunch of this and delete it, pull this down to about there. I'm going to pull it down to that track. You guys are like, I don't want to watch you edit. Sure you do. Because you never know what you might glean from watching somebody else work. You know, we all work in our bubbles now. It was so cool to be on staff someplace, to, you know, walk into somebody else's room and watch them work. So this is what I did at the other... I literally just looked at what I had done in the stems and said, oh, well, let me do that and see how it works. And so it's still soloed. Turns out I didn't necessarily need the stems after all, but I was glad that I did. And that brings me to some more sound energy stuff, because you know we love sound energy stuff. So at the beginning, if I mute my strings, I'm going to mute the bass and the drums too.
Can you define stems?
Oh, yes, thank you. It's kind of like splits, but just for the music. So what they gave me was, they gave me a full mix, but then they also gave me a track of just the bass, a track of just the drums, trumpets, trombones, strings, voice, yes. Yeah, they gave me voice separate too. And I hid most of those tracks because for presentation purpose, I wasn't going to show all of this. So now I brought some of them back out. But I'm going to just play the beginning again without the extra music stems.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side. And now he says he wants to cut a deal.
So that's enough. So the strings, I turn the strings back on and listen.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side.
So not only are you getting all of those strings, which feels really cool there, but what I did with the EQ, and this is not one of those EQs that I would normally use to show a bunch of editors, because you're going to look at that and like, I'm not turning those knobs, right? And I get it, I totally get it. But with everything that we've talked about and everything we know about human hearing is from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and we've got our low and our low mid and our upper mids and our highs. Well, that's what we're dealing with here. Low frequency, low mid frequency, high mid frequency, high frequency. The knob in the middle is the gain, and I can just mouse over it and see what I did here, because of course this is a modeled analog EQ, so therefore they have to give you knobs that don't actually show you anything, because it has to be just like the real thing. But if you mouse over it, you get some data. So at 180 hertz, which is pretty low, I'm boosting 6 dB, which is significant. At 330 hertz, I'm boosting about 4 or 5, probably, or 3. I got a gentle cut at 3.3 hertz, that's my upper mid-range, my high mids. And then at 10K, I've got a high shelf, so 10K and above, I'm pushing it up 7 dB. This is on my strings. And that's significant, because this EQ can do it. I wouldn't do 7 dB boost 10K and up on just any EQ, but this one sounds beautiful. I use this one on strings always, because it just sounds so good. This just makes it sing and makes it wonderful. You asked if that was the secret sauce. It's the secret sauce right here, because you feel that and you're just like, ah, that's the real deal. These,
With and without, just so we hear.
absolutely. In fact, I will neutralize this, just that band or the EQ?
Yes, yeah,
just that band. All right. So that's without, and I don't know how much we're going to hear.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side.
And then it was like 7. I can double click it and make it a 7.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side.
Ironically, when I did that, the voice sounded brighter. Like the whole spot sounded brighter and better. I don't know how much you're hearing back there, but...
Can we do it with just kill the EQ?
Kill the EQ, yeah.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side. And now he says he wants to cut a deal.
And with.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side.
It's subtle, but that's what I deal with all day long. Little, tiny, subtle changes. I've got Blue Skies. I have the Blue Sky System one. It's basically a smaller version of what Skywalker Sound has in their big rooms and a bigger version of what they have in their sound design rooms. So I'm kind of in between. I feel that's a pretty good place to land. But it's nice, and they're gentle. They're not like Gentle X or some of the other speakers that are a little more harsh and a little more hyped. These, I almost feel like sometimes I want more highs coming out of my speakers, but I'm like, no, I'm good. I can mix all day without hurting myself. Did you have a question?
In the early development of microphones in the 30s, I'm sorry I wasn't there, there was the mantra, I want to hear the fuzz of the bow. And I think that's what's happening here.
That's exactly what's happening here. And in fact, even on the bass guitar track, the fuzz of the bow, it's a little different. I mean, it's an upright bass. But this one, I've got, is that all I did to that? Oh, no, I did this too. Let's solo up this bass just for a second. And well, here first, actually, let's listen to the bass in the original music track. It's there, but then I added this other track, so if I solo them together, that's why I needed the stems, because I'm like, I don't like your mix, no offense, but I needed this. And so, so this is the bass track without any of my process. Oh, I had it cranked up too, sorry. Let me get, because louder is better. Well, in the last demonstration, I forgot I cranked it all up and didn't put it back. So this is with no plugins. And we got some noise. And this is with them. Very subtle. I'm not even really hearing anything here, so I'm not going to use that as a... But basically, what I did here on the upright bass is I've got this high-mid frequency boost of 5.4 dB, which is significant, at about 1.2. Typically with bass, whether it's an electric bass or an upright bass, there's something in that 1.2, 1.5, even 1.6 range, you know, something in the upper, I mean, that's mid-range stuff, and you think, oh, bass is all down here. That is what gives it character. That's what makes it real. And when I played this in a room with full range speakers, the difference between having that bass stem and not having the bass stem was like, without the bass stem, yes, the bass part is doing its job. And with it, you feel like there's an upright bass player in the room with you. And so these little things are just huge to me. But they're all subtle. I do all these little tiny subtle things. Yes?
I tend to, when I'm doing mixing, I tend to just like wear headphones because, you know, I want to, hold the speakers, but I also want to hear the subtleties that you're talking about.
Right.
Do you not do that? You just,
I check on headphones, but I don't mix on headphones unless I'm traveling. But that said, I have very expensive speakers and I have sound treatment in my room that makes my room perform. No, but well, actually, I probably, no, I can't hear the Jets in my room. But that wouldn't have been as big a deal as the sound from those speakers bouncing all over my room. That's a bigger deal than jets going over. Because when a jet goes over, you know it's a jet, you hear the jet, you ignore the jet. Your brain can do that. What your brain can't do is differentiate signals that hit your ear within 20 milliseconds of the signal that was supposed to hit your ear. So if your room is big enough, then you need less treatment because your brain can filter that. But if you're in a bedroom-sized room and a speaker wants to travel 5 feet to get to your ear, but it also traveled 2 feet to hit that wall and then 6 feet to your ear, so it went 5 feet and 8 feet, well, approximately 1 millisecond per foot, you got a 3 millisecond comb filter delay going on with that one reflection. It also went up to the ceiling, and then that one bounced over here and came over here, and the thousands of reflections that you got within that 20 millisecond period kind of made it so that it's hard to mix. And that is more important than the jets going over. So yeah, the headphones are great. Get good headphones. I've got a pair of Sennheisers that I can mix on all day long. I can go 8 hours on my HD 600s. They're only a couple $100, maybe 3 something. Yes?
2 questions. There's a local producer who does radio commercials, produces the spot, takes it out to his car, and plays it in the car.
I used to do that.
And long ago and far away, I'm going to drop a name. Mark Berger was mixing Amadeus, and he went to the North Point Theater in San Francisco to see, do you not want to play that back in the place where it's going to be played back?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And in fact, if you're mixing for theatrical release, those mix rooms pretty much are theaters. So you're kind of doing the final mix in a movie theater. That's basically what they are. My room is not. So I can mix for Netflix and deliver to them with confidence. But if I have a project that's going to go theatrical, I'm going to do what's called pre-dubs in my room, where all of my stems, back to stems, I'm going to make stems. I'll make 5/1 stems of all of the, so I'll have a voiceover stem and SFX, A, B, C, however many sound effects stems I need, music stems, and then we're going to go to a theater and mix it. That just has to happen for theatrical release. People claim less and less now that it has to happen because the lines get blurred a little bit, but it really does need to happen. I wish what would happen is the guys who are mixing for theatrical release would also come and make a version in my room, because it should translate. You know, the old school concept was if you mix in a big room, it'll translate down, but you can't mix down for a big room. The school of thought has kind of shifted to where if you're in a mid-size room, which just slightly bigger than mine, if I was 20% bigger, 25% bigger, and set up a little more theater-like, I could probably argue that my mixes in that room would translate up just fine.
What kind of space relationship? Give us a feeling for space relationship.
The room I mix in is bedroom sized, maybe. I mean, rooms are bigger in Georgia because, you know, yeah, 15 by 20.
And then you're talking the size of speakers, you're talking about like 6s, 5s, 6s?
They're 6.5s, and they're set up in an ITU near field configuration, which is not theatrical style. So when I say ITU configuration, what I'm saying is from my mix position, all the speakers are the same distance from me, and the fronts are like, you know, 30 degrees, the 120 degrees to the rears. I'm only 5/1. I'm not doing 7/1 or Atmos or anything else. I thought about it. If I have a need, I can do that. But in my personal opinion, my room's a little small to go more than 5/1. And I might have to treat some more things and do more acoustical things. Yes?
Just out of curiosity, is that the reason why so many like Blu-ray or DVD movies have the dialogue track drowned out by the music and sound mix because they're not mixing it for at-home viewing?
That's a big part of the problem, yeah. Because, well, and it goes back to the Fletcher-Munson curve that we were talking about. If you're not listening at home at 85 dB either. You don't have movie theater speakers in your house. You don't have that much physical space, and you're not cranking it up that loud. So it kind of needs a different mix. But really, it's almost a mystery why they don't translate the way that they should. Part of it is, if you're listening in stereo, I don't think people care as much about their fold-downs as they should. You know, the fold-down is where you mix it in 5/1, and then you've got some tools that basically create your stereo mix for you, and you're supposed to monitor that and make sure it's what you want. I personally like to make a stereo mix. And it's very possible inside of Pro Tools to do both mixes at the same time and just choose which one you want to monitor. And everything that you do on the individual track level is going to go to both mixes, but your relations, you kind of do your own fold down essentially as you're working. I like that, because then you really get to choose how much of the center channel, because in a fold down, it's got numbers like, okay, center channel now goes left and right, but how much? The surrounds now go left and right, but how much? But when you're mixing, I would like to choose some surround content needs to go left and right, pulled down 3 or 6 dB, and some surround content I'd rather not have. Yes?
When I kind of started out with Pro Tools and then went to Logic Pro because I was mostly doing my stuff on a laptop and mobile.
Yeah.
Now my Logic Pro doesn't work because Apple killed it, and now they got this new version It to me it just looks like GarageBand.
You can actually switch, when you first install Logic, it does look more like GarageBand than it needs to. And there's a setting, and I don't remember where it is, but you basically turn on Advanced, and it kicks it up from GarageBand Plus to the real Logic. And you get more features, and you get stuff to look a little more like a DAW, a digital
Would it be a
workstation.
good contender on a lap? I don't, last time I checked, most of Avid stuff didn't even work on laptops. It was
Well,
too much.
I can tell you, through my career, I've switched back and forth between the big workstation, and my laptop is literally just for email, and switch, I'm going to run everything on the laptop. And when they announced the i9 processor, whenever that was that last year? Okay, so last summer, I bought this computer, and I retired my cheese grater. What we used to call cheese grater. Now they got a new cheese grater, so how confusing is that?
No, the racks are just.
Yeah, so I retired my Big Mac, I like that. And I am literally working on this. So what I do is I take this, I put it on a stand, and I plug in all of my Thunderbolt 3, and I power screens and audio and everything aplenty out of this little tiny 5mm thick thing. And it's great. It really is.
So basically, would there ever be a reason, in other words, would the new Logic Pro be something that you could do pro work on, or forget it and just go with it?
It depends on your pro work. I do pro work in Logic, but it's music. I don't do this in Logic. I would never do this in Logic, personally. For many reasons. You want everybody interested in that? Is that kind of a thing? One reason I would never do audio post in Logic is because nobody else is, and I have to interface with other people. Another reason is I can edit fast in Pro Tools. I can't edit in Logic. Logic is illogical. And it's not just me. I think it's don't go to sleep. Sorry. I think Logic is really GarageBand Plus. You know, it's good for music. The drummer in Logic is amazing. I love that. It's a great feature, especially if you're doing music for videos and somebody wants to change the length of the video, and you literally just take your drummer track, and instead of making some creative edit, you just say, I want it shorter. And it does it. It is like, it's AI on steroids. It's the real deal. You have to do your other music tracks yourself, but the drummer takes care of itself. So I like Logic for what it does, but I wouldn't do this.
But the thing is, I kind of do both. I'm small, okay?
Well, I got Logic right here. Logic's $200. So if you're gonna get Pro Tools, which I've got the stupid expensive Pro Tools, but you could get the regular Pro Tools. If you're going to do that. But if you're not interfacing with other people, you have choices. You can work in Nuendo, which is a serious contender for Pro Tools. It's the real deal. It's a track-based digital audio workstation. I know a lot of guys in games that use Nuendo because they don't have to exchange files. But I know a lot of people in games who are using Pro Tools because they do. And Pro Tools is the industry standard, and we're just not going to get away with it. But if you can afford Pro Tools, then you throw an extra $200 and you got Logic too. Boom, done. Do your music over here, do your other stuff over here.
So you're using a ton of plugins too.
Yes, but when you buy plugins, they'll work in both. And in fact, I tried to install Premiere on this machine for this talk and ran into a few issues. You can see the icon right there, but we'll just remove from the dock. Yeah, oh yeah, thank you. But the basic idea is when you install plugins, the plugin installers will say, do you want this kind and this kind and this kind and this kind? Because Pro Tools has its own thing, and then Logic has its own thing. They're called audio units, AU. And then the VST that you're going to get for something else. So you just go ahead and say, if you've got all of this stuff, you say install them all, and boom, you use them everywhere. and they just work.
Audition for those of us that have the Adobe suite.
Audition is fine. I haven't spent enough time in Audition to really give it the credit that it may or may not deserve. But here's my thing on Audition. It's never really going to contend with Pro Tools, because Pro Tools does what Pro Tools does, and Audition isn't really made for that. Audition is made for if you're working in Premiere and you want to send some audio out and get it cleaned up and bring it back home. That's so much quicker than going to Pro Tools. But if you're going to send your entire project for audio post-production, the real deal, you're probably going to send it to Pro Tools. But I can mix in Premiere. In fact, you know, back on my whole bio thing, one of the things that I did, I almost wrote a book, and it was going to be sound for editors. And I've done some tutorials and things on mixing in Premiere and some things that you can find. I've got a YouTube and a whatever, I don't know what it is, but we can figure it out. Oh yeah, you can get it from LinkedIn, absolutely. So find me, Michael Cardillo. I'll put my contact information up. Yes?
I was wondering if you heard of the company called SonarWorks. Basically, like, they made and calibrated some like generic headphones. So like, it's back to the mixing thing. Like, if you don't have a place to mix with like for a mixing environment, that they're headphones that they calibrate so it sounds like it would, so you can mix correctly. Do you know about them?
I know about them. I've never used them, and they're not the only ones doing it. Actually, Waves, who makes a lot of these plugins, they have a thing like that, the Waves NX, that basically, and you can, and Waves takes it to the next level. Like with Waves, you can say, I want to mix at Abbey Road, and you're there, theoretically. But I mean, you put in, I think you put in what kind of headphones you have, and then you tell it where you want to mix. And it's kind of like a convolution reverb. A convolution reverb uses impulse responses to simulate a real environment. And so I use something called Altiverb that I paid $1,000 for one plugin. But it's amazing. It will, I can put my strings in the Sydney Opera House if I want to. You guys want to hear that? Yeah. Now, unfortunately, yeah. Well, unfortunately, these strings, they're kind of already mixed, but we'll do it anyway. So I'm going to just plug it in here, which is not how I would normally do it. But if I go to Altiverb, and I'm only going to go stereo. I'm not going to put, you know, because we don't have, actually, we do have, we could work this out. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just sending stereo. We've got speakers. So I just click right here, and I say, let's see, Sydney Opera House in Concert Hall. Hey, there it is, Sydney Opera House. And then I can change some stuff. I can put you in a different chair. It's not going to work so well for that because it's already got reverb on it and it's already kind of mixed into a space. But this is with and without. Yeah, it was all right. When I'm doing it myself and I've got individual tracks of things and they're not processed already, the difference is night and day. In fact, let's put the bass player in the Sydney Opera House, even though I probably never would do such a thing. And then we can actually move him. We can move our position closer. It's got to load for a second. Oh, stage rear. So this is backstage, upper circle. Sydney Opera House, upper circle. And what they do is they literally, they put speakers in the Sydney Opera House and they blew impulse responses out and they put microphones all over the place and they captured this, and these are some scientific geniuses. They're in Europe somewhere. And man, it is just, it's incredible. I mean, it feels like cheating.
How do you get anything done when you have so many things?
You can't show this to a client. I mean, you can't show
No. I'll tell you what I can't show to a client is RX from Isotope. If, in all seriousness, if you guys are doing your own audio, you just need to go get RX. And then spend some time on it. Not just noise reduction, but everything. The deplosive is amazing. I did a tutorial on plosives, right? I did this whole thing about how to avoid plosives when you're recording and then what you can do to make them ever so slightly better. And then 2 months later, Isotope releases RX3 or whenever the deplosive module was first introduced. And I was like, oh, hey, if you watched my last tutorial, check this out. And in 10 seconds, I did a better job. I mean,
what's the best way to get rid of scratchy sound?
It depends on the kind of scratchy sound, but the answer is RX. I don't know which module until I hear it, but...
It was singing, but it came out scratchy.
Scratchy like...
Speakers blown out or something.
Okay, well, it depends, because see, if you're thinking overmodulation, if you're thinking something's clipping, like digital clipping, if you literally just, nobody was listening and they recorded it too hot and the whole thing is unusable, distorted, the declip tool inside of RX can help you. But there are times when it can't. And it's also not just a one-click wonder, although it's really close. You can select what you want, hit suggest, and it will suggest how much you need to go, and you process, and it is pretty amazing. The declip tool is magic because for 15 years I tried to declip things, and I would work and work and work and make it marginally better. And at the end of 2 hours, I would throw it away and tell my client that they just had to go re-record. You know, but now I'm like, sure, clip it. Do what you want. You don't have to listen.
Can you use that with Premiere?
Yes. Yeah, you can use it with Premiere. It might be better to use it inside of Audition and round trip it, but I don't really know. That's not a workflow thing that I can, you know.
Thank you.
But RX, it's standalone also. Like you can literally just open up RX, drag an audio file into it, fix it, overwrite that audio file, and walk away. Or export as a new audio file. So those are all big, big things. We got off track, but I love that. I love that we got off track, and I love getting off track, because honestly, I've told you guys everything I need to tell you. This is just fun. So before I try to get back on track, does anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
I just Googled it because I don't know audio that well, but there's an Element suite for RX?
Yes.
Isotope? Yeah.
Anything RX, anything that Isotope calls Elements is kind of like their intro version of that. So it'll have less stuff, but probably still really good. I would look and see which modules are in there. The things that you absolutely need, you have to have declip. If Elements doesn't have declip, you probably should just go ahead and get the next one. Because they have 3 levels of it. Like I've got the advanced version that has everything, but then there's the regular RX, and then there's Elements, and I don't know what's not in Elements. But you need declip. If you ever shoot anything outside, you need the de-wind tool, and you need to spend some time and learn how to use it. I do golf videos from time to time for PGA Tour, and I'm de-winding all the time. But if you do broad spectrum de-winding, you know, you've got to maybe go in there a little surgically, and you've got to look at the spectrum. But it's powerful stuff, powerful stuff. Deplosive is pretty important if anybody ever pops a microphone, because it's kind of the only thing that can do that. And of course, anything's going to come with the denoise plugins and stuff, so I think those are the big ones. Yes?
Where would Fairlight fit in that spectrum of sound? That's a good question.
Fairlight was or Fairlight is? Which one are we talking about?
When it's integrated into.
Yeah, I don't know. I was curious about it. I haven't really looked into it. I know the old Fairlight, we used to have them at Crawford, which I told you I left there 12 or 13 years ago. We had Fairlights before the whole facility was switched over to Pro Tools. So 20 years ago, well, not 20, 18 years ago, we had Fairlights at Crawford. There are people in Atlanta still using Fairlights, the old one, now. I don't know anybody who's doing the new integrated Fairlight thing, so I really have no reference on that. I'm sure it's great though. I mean, Fairlight, when I used it, I used to say it drove like a Cadillac, because it just it's smooth. It's got its own interface. You're not plunking away on a keyboard as much as you are their interface. And even just going online, offline, just the way it locates, the way it drives, the transport controls, just everything about it just feels good, solid, like a well-made machine.
Have you seen it on DaVinci?
I screenshots and stuff,
It's really different.
but I haven't really.
I don't think it's set up as a console, or is it? Is it set up as a?
Well, I think you probably can get more, just like Pro Tools. Like you can do Pro Tools in the box, or you can just keep expanding your Pro Tools and get all kinds of hardware. Like I've got some hardware at home. I don't have the big stuff because I don't feel like I need it. But the one I could never live without is called the Pro Tools Dock. And this iPad sits in it. And I don't even care much about the iPad, but I'll use it to show all my tracks. And so I can quickly select a track. And then I've got that fader right here with all the buttons I need to do everything because I like to feel it. I like to have a tactile fader. And I do a lot of stuff just in the box, but sometimes you just need to ride a fader, and that's the old audio engineer in me that just can't get away from it. Because I want to feel it. I want to feel like I'm part of the performance, and that's just important to me. So that's the one I could never live without. It's got transport controls, and the only one I use is the roll back 5 seconds and do it again. Because when you're automating, typically you hit something late. You're like, oh, I didn't go down fast enough. I didn't go up fast enough, so you hit that button, you're still in touch right, and you just hit it again. Yeah, and usually that second time, because it only goes back 5 seconds, you nail it. We had a question, yes?
You ever heard something called Acusonus? They're called single knob tools. They have noise remover, reverb remover, plosive remover, de-esser.
I have not.
I just heard on a podcast this week.
Interesting. If it's a new product, it's probably pretty good. If it's been around 20 years, then I would have heard about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty new. Specifically for video editors too, I think it's
To make it simple.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean that. I'm not talking down. I'm sorry. That did not mean to come out that way. But honestly, like for me, if I'm doing a video and I need color correction, I don't want all that stuff. I just need I need to hire somebody. Honestly, be an advocate for color, right? Hire somebody. That's what you need to do. This was so fun. I'm going to move on. I want to show one more thing about, because really the purpose of me pulling up this trailer was primarily about decision making. And so the decisions of what to cover, because remember, this came from an editor who normally does his own sound start to finish. So I knew he was going to pretty much cover what he wanted to cover. When I say that, I mean like you're going to put a sound for something if you feel it needs a sound, right? So he's going to cover what he feels he needs to cover, so I shouldn't be adding much. And really, I'm just mixing. That was kind of the premise going in, but I can't help myself because I'm not just a mixer, I'm a sound designer as well. So I replaced a few things, I changed a few things, I added a lot of things, but then I had to decide how they get mixed in. And so I want to show an example of how, and what I'm going to do is I'll just go full screen on this. Actually, we don't need to even see it. This is the scene where, I'll play the scene.
I had a few ups and downs along the way. Eddie and Marie fell in love and ran off. For sure, Tammy's the best shot in town.
Anyway, it goes a little bit longer than that, but you get the idea. What I want to show is when he says Eddie and Marie ran off, Derek didn't put footsteps for Eddie and Marie running off. Now, it's a wide shot. You're not really going to hear any footsteps anyway. You've got cars here. He didn't cover the cars either. And when I first watched the video, I was like, hey, do we have any real gameplay sound of these cars? Because I want to cover the cars. That was my first reaction until I paid attention to the story. The story here, which is very well spelled out in the voiceover. That's the easiest way to tell your story, right? So they're telling us the story. Well, Eddie and Marie ran off. Has nothing to do with that car that I was looking at. Oh, there are two little people here in this wide shot. Well, I need footsteps. I want to draw, now it's eye trace. So it was story, eye trace, right? The eye trace, I want to draw your eyes to those people. So I'm going to play it first with just the basic music and effects that I got. And we'll just listen. It doesn't really matter that we... Here, I'll just push this over to the left a little more. Is that it? The visual's not important.
Did you glue all the sound bites of the voiceover together, or was they spoken?
I slid the voice around a little bit where, because, you know, if you remember the mashed potato thing, the fourth one was time. And sometimes to get my mashed potatoes and my gravy to work, I just needed to move the voiceover just a little bit because I wanted a music hit or a something that conflicted with that. And if the voice is speaking, the voice is number one. And I can't resist that. So if I push the voice, I can make music number one, and then voice takes number one, and music can hang on to two, and that's just fine. So sometimes I do slide things a little bit. This was the first project I ever did with Derek, so I was very judicious about that. I didn't slide much because I didn't know how far, and he was actually very tolerant of everything I did. But here's a case where he was right and I was wrong, and I already ruined the punchline, but here we go. This is where it came first.
I had a few ups and downs along the way. Eddie and Marie fell in love and ran off. And sure, Tammy's the best shot in town. If she doesn't show up drunk, that is.
Okay, so two things that were missing there for me were the footsteps of Eddie and Marie running off, and then this bullet hit, because it's a game trailer. If a bullet hits somebody, you're gonna hear that. You're gonna hear that louder than you should. So I went in and I made a version with sound effects.
I had a few ups and downs along the way. Eddie and Marie fell in love and ran off. And sure, Tammy's the best shot in town. If she doesn't show up drunk, that is.
And it's, you know, this is not a mixed environment here, but you guys heard that. You hear the difference and you're like, okay, better. I got eye trace, I got nothing missing, the story is there, everything's good. And that wasn't exactly what I sent him, but that was the idea. I sent him this with the footsteps and with this, and he said, I really want... At first he asked me if I would take out the footsteps, and he was very polite about it. He didn't say take out the footsteps. He was like, hey, can we get rid of the footsteps? And I'm like, well, here's my justification in getting rid of the footsteps. Let's figure out where we need to land. I needed the footsteps so that I would look at Eddie and Marie and understand the story and not get distracted by this car. And he's like, wow, you're absolutely right. And then I ran from there and I said, well, he's absolutely right because, you know, Walter Murch's rule of 6, eye trace is number 4 out of 6. Yeah, it's important, but it's not as important as rhythm, story, and emotion. The rhythm was already set. He's got that. The rhythm is set by the music that I was downplaying so I could get these sound effects. So I was kind of sacrificing rhythm for eye trace and story. I was getting credit for story, but I was sacrificing emotion also because when I punched up the music and backed off on the sounds, so what I ended up doing, and I'll just get right to the chase here, I brought in the footsteps just enough to notice, and you're like, footsteps, people, you got your eye trace, the story stays true because you're still listening to the voice, but then they're kind of not a big deal, and I pushed the music up over that whole thing, and especially on the hit, it was the gunshot also. He didn't want, like I punched up the gunshot and didn't have a whole lot of music there, and he's like, I love that music hit, I really want the music hit for the gunshot, because he cut the trailer. Of course he wants the music hit for the gunshot, but you know what? He didn't just cut it, he produced it. He played the game. All that gameplay footage is him playing the game so that he could make this trailer. This is his trailer and I'm working for him. He wants more music, and you know what? He's right. The music made it better. So this is where we ended up. Oh, and also this adds the bass guitar in there too. So this is a better music mix also, but it's got some more punches in the music.
I had a few ups and downs along the way. Eddie and Marie fell in love and ran off. And sure, Tammy's the best shot in town. If she doesn't show up drunk, that is.
So you still get the blood splatter, bullet hit, it's there, but that big music swell is bigger. That music hit is bigger, it means more, the music is mixed a little better, and music is always going to give you more emotion. So even though I was shooting for story and eye trace, we ended up getting emotion, story, rhythm, and eye trace by making the mix right. And I think that's a big deal. And it took collaboration on that, because the mix that I first sent him, not like, here's your final mix, but kind of like, here's where I am today. I'm not expecting to work a whole lot tomorrow kind of mix, you know? So it was mix number one. It was the first thing I shared with him, but it was after a day of mixing, and it wasn't that. It didn't have that much music. It was overplaying the sound effects and underplaying the music. And together, we fixed it.
Yeah, you almost use the music burst as the gunshot.
It kind of is. I mean, there is a gunshot under there, but the music burst is the gunshot, and that's a trailer trick, and it works.
I like the footsteps.
You like?
The footsteps.
Oh yeah, and they were appropriate in here, and they're a little hard to hear in certain environments, but it was enough. It got your eye to go there. So it's about mixed decisions, who wins. It's the auditory hierarchy, but it's not just, oh, I want voice, music, sound effects. It's at any moment that auditory hierarchy changes. And if you're thinking about that, then you're thinking like a mixer, and your stuff is going to be amazing. And it's not just over time, but it's over frequencies as well. And I've got some really cool tricks. If you guys want to see some of the tools for how I do some of these things, I like duckers, for example. A ducker is a compressor. Well, let me back up. For anybody who doesn't know, and I'll just pretend there's somebody here who has no idea what a compressor is. So basically what a compressor is when the input volume goes above a certain threshold, I'm going to tell it, you can keep going up, but don't go up as fast as you were. Basically, it takes the louder signals and pushes them down so that theoretically you can bring everything back up, but that's not even always the case. You're just basically finding a threshold and taking everything above it and pushing it down at a certain ratio. So 2 to 1 would mean go up half as fast beyond this point in volume, if that makes sense. So a ducker kind of does a thing where you're going to say, take a threshold from something else and cause gain reduction over here. And so I'll put a ducker on my music that, here's my music sub. This is a compressor. And if you want to see one of these work normally, here, we'll do this one first. This is the voiceover compressor.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side. And now he says he wants to cut a deal.
So what I'm doing is I'm taking that voiceover that's a bit dynamic, and I'm just kind of squeezing it together with all the right settings. I don't want to get too heavy into that, but that's what it does. This particular compressor is really good at that. This is the Waves Renaissance compressor, super cheap. Like if you buy it by itself, it's like $29 when it's on sale. It's part of a bundle that the whole bundle is great, and when it's on sale, it's like $150 or less sometimes. Crazy cheap from Waves and just top notch. I use it all the time. But the one I want to show you is using that same compressor, and I'm going to play the same part of the clip, but this compressor is physically on the music track. It's actually not on the music track, it's on the music sub, but it's triggered from this send that I call music ducker, which I should actually call VO ducker because it's the VO that ducks it. It's a logic thing. But so whenever the voice comes in, the music is getting pushed down rather than just the voice.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side. And now he says he wants to cut a deal. He doesn't know what's coming.
So it does automatically when you manually.
And it does automatically. And I do some of that manually as well, but I do the manual stuff by feel. The automatic, but you saw it wasn't doing much. It was doing 1 dB of gain reduction, which...
You can adjust that.
Well, yeah, and what I do for a ducker, for those who are taking notes, I do super low ratio. This is 1.08 to 1. So that means as it goes above the threshold, like literally less than 10% change in how much more it goes over the threshold. But I bring the threshold way down. So if you watch, oh, well, see, what this should show you here, it should show the output of the music, but it should show the input. It should have some way to show you the input of the voice. This is showing you the input of the music. So the threshold that just happens to be right next to this really doesn't mean anything, because the threshold is talking about the voice. But you'll see that that's when it triggers. And I've got it on super fast, optical, smooth, and a reasonably long release. So it's gonna, as soon as the voice comes in, it's gonna go down fast to get out of the way, and then come up gently enough, but it's only coming up 1 dB. Honestly, for this much gain reduction, it doesn't matter what my release is. The reason I leave it long is because I'm only doing 1 dB, and you might as well leave that extra space for the brain. You know, give the brain a break for 79 milliseconds.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side. And now he's...
And if I crank this, like, let's just make it like when he speaks, I want that music out of the way. Like, you know, let's just see what it does.
Ronnie O'Neill. He's been a thorn in my side. And now he says he wants to cut a deal.
It's not completely unacceptable. You know what I mean? Like, that's extreme, and it's still kind of okay in the right setting. This type of trailer, no. This type of trailer needs more finesse than that. It was 1.08. I'll just make sure not to save this session. Yes?
This is going a little bit over my head. So the voice, is that a specific track that you picked? Could you pick like an instrument or someone singing?
I can pick anything. Yes, so someone's singing. But what I did is, instead of just picking that track, I made a send from that track. So right here, to look at this right here, this is kind of like a channel strip. In the old analog audio world, channel strips went up and down this way. But now, and we have that in Pro Tools also. They go that way if you want to look at them, but we don't look at those. So here, because it's a track and it's my edit, so this is my channel strip. It's got a, you know, solo and mute and input monitor and all that stuff over there. These are my inserts, so my compressors go there. And these are my sends. So I'm sending to this music ducker. So I just have this little fader that says, oh, I want you to send to the music ducker. And I'm not even sending full signal to the music ducker. I'm sending it pulled back 13 dB. So that's part of the reason why it was only doing 1 dB of gain reduction. It's because I'm not sending that much. Normally I would leave those at 0 because I don't normally check them. But this is kind of a finesse trailer. I do some things where they're just 100% music, 100% sound effects, 100% voiceover, and then 100% trailer effects. You know, you're like, okay, I'm at 400%. Yeah, deal with it. Okay, I can deal with that. And I do. And part of how I deal with that is this one's going to blow your mind. So before I move on, I want to make sure that you're, so what I was doing is I'm taking that voiceover track, sending it to something called Music Ducker that I just made up, and then Music Ducker is what triggers this. So instead of saying when this sound goes up, control it, it's saying when this other sound goes up, control this one. And that's how that works. And that's pretty advanced audio stuff, so I mean, don't kick yourself if it didn't make sense. But since we're, yes, oh, 5 minutes, really? I love this group. You guys are awesome. Yes.
Okay, well, just real quick then. What if, you know, some kids watching this on their laptop in the college dorm or on their phone?
Yeah.
Are they going to actually hear these nuances? Like,
No, they're for me. They're for me. No, in all seriousness, though, bad audio gets worse in bad situations. So whenever you start compromising the playback, anything that's less than perfect becomes more less than perfect, if that makes any sense. So no, they're not going to notice any of these nuances, but I'm still going to do the best mix that I possibly can. The things that they're not going to notice playing it on their iPhone through the speaker is, you know, the bass, the painstaking time that I spend managing that bottom octave or two. They're not going to hear any of that anyway. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that if there's something there they need to hear, that something also has to have higher content. So here's one where creative decisions based on sound energy, if you're putting a whoosh in your project and you've got this bassy, heavy whoosh and it goes Okay, great, you got that whoosh. But you've got heavy music underneath it, and you're trying to balance this bass heavy whoosh over this bass heavy music, and you just straight up can't do it. I probably can, but I don't want to, because what I want to do is I want to make a new whoosh that actually has some high frequency content, especially if that whoosh is supporting a moving graphic. Because, and I'd love to dive into the science of why higher frequencies are better for moving graphics. You know what, give me a minute, I'll do that. Because there's, I know, I'm down to like 3 or 4. Bottom line is, don't use that heavy whoosh, use one with high frequency content. And the reason is because the way that we hear, we have 2 ears. And the reason we have 2 ears is so that we can localize, right? Well, the way that we localize is with interaural time difference and interaural amplitude difference. So interaural means between the 2 ears. Amplitude means it's louder on this side than it is on this side. That happens with high frequencies. If there's a high frequency over here, it's much louder in this ear than it is in this ear because my head is an acoustical shadow and this ear is hardly getting any at all. Lower frequency bends right around my head, comes in at about the same level, but it has a slight time difference. They both have a time difference, but it's insignificant in the high frequency. It's the level difference that matters. So since we're not messing with time too much between the left and the right, we're kind of pan-potted mono is how we mix for the most part. You're going to take your whoosh that pans from left to right, and you're going to make it a high frequency whoosh, so I hear it pan left to right, and it cuts through all of that other stuff. And then you'll find that you can pull it way back in the mix because you used the right whoosh and you can put it in the right place. But I promise you, if you got bass heavy music and bass heavy whooshes, you're trying to push both of them until you're out of spec and you just can't do anything. I would love to go into more transient shaping and fast ducking. I do want to show you one ducker because this one is amazing. This one actually even blew my mind. I have a ducker on my music track that's triggered from, I split my sound effects into A, B, and C, and SFX-A is all the transient stuff. So it's the machine guns and it's the punches. And I'm triggering my music track ducker. I've got this one little ducker. Do you see that?
Says he wants to cut a deal.
And you look at that gain reduction, and that is 13 dB of gain reduction. And if somebody told me that they put a ducker on their music that was causing 13 dB of gain reduction from a sound effect, I'd be like, you are nuts. But the way I got away with it is it's super fast. It is literally as fast as it can be in and out. And even if I mute my sound effects and I don't hear that gun, and I'm going to mute all these sound effects right here, mute, and I'm going to play the same thing. You don't even hear it.
Long before I was building an empire. And maybe.
Because our brains fill in those holes. But the fact that we pulled out that much sound energy, that gun is loud. When I put it back in the mix.
What happens if you slow down? Hear the difference between slow fast, just for curiosity's sake?
I can't play my whole timeline slow speed, believe it or not. I could play individual clips slow speed, but that wouldn't help us. No. I could bounce it out and play it at half speed. But really, I mean, that's the thing. Like, we're pulling all that energy out so that you can hear the sound effects super clearly, and your brain fills in the holes. So why not? Pull it out. Yes?
Quick question for you on collaboration. I'm an editor, and I'm going to work with you as a sound designer.
Yes, thank you.
In my edit, I'm working on a scene, and in my brain, I want audio, music, sound effects, ambience, whatever, to kind of build to a point in the scene that's pivotal, and then I want it all to go away.
Yeah.
Right? So that it just drives the viewer to that point in the scene.
Right.
How do you want an editor to communicate that to you? Is it through a temp mix? Is it through notes on a timeline? Is it
I want him to call me on the phone and say what you just said. But it would be wonderful if I knew what you were putting in there just to communicate to me and what you were married to. Because as an editor, there's a good chance you're sitting with the client or getting a lot more client feedback that I'm not a part of. And so if the client is absolutely married to this whoosh and I swap it out because I don't know any better, well, that's not a good thing. But I'm going to change out your whooshes unless you tell me we love these whooshes, because I'm going to do what's right for that spot and that mix and all that energy, because I'm going to do what I do, right? You put it in there because you needed a whoosh there. I get that. I might leave it. In fact, Derek's whooshes, I think I kept all but one. I changed out one whoosh because it was a little redundant and I liked mine. It had a little more high frequency content and it was one of those pans at the end. Are we out of time? This was so fun, guys. All right, one more question.
Okay. Something I've been toying with, just edit sound and video, since we got video edits too. So, with websites, we do what's responsive websites. So they're good for cell phones and they're good on a full,
Right.
TV, right?
With a style sheet or whatever they're doing today, I don't even know.
Yeah. But the thing, full screen TV. But the thing is that what about, video, if you're shooting everything wide and all that, and you look on a cell phone, I've seen it, even in production movies, where they did all these split screens and everything, but if I'm looking on a cell phone or even on a tablet, it's just, you can't see anything.
Right.
Okay, well, God help you if you need caption, because they're talking in Cantonese. But the thing is that, and maybe this is just too much money, but would there be a reasoning for maybe shooting or creating in sound a completely different, a version for full screen and a version for cell phone? And then having, because you can code it where the website will load based on
Yeah.
the,
I mean, remember when we all had 4x3 TVs? They kind of did that. They didn't just cut off the sides. They panned and scanned that thing around, right? Somebody actually took some time and they made it for your TV. But now that we have every screen size imaginable, it's probably going to be one more year before I can watch the next, Marvel movie on my watch. Yeah, how stupid is that? Like, why would I want to, but they're going to do it? You know what I mean? I think it's out of hand, and I don't think there's a solution. I don't mean to be a pessimist, but yes, it would be great to do that. I think sound should do that. I think video should do that. Everything should do that, but they're not going to. We're getting kicked out.